I have never seen a film that is so disrespectful to a genre. And look, whether that's intentional or not, as someone who genuinely loves horror films, this movie offended me. So today we're going to be looking at a no-budget feature film for the first time by director Lucas Disparro, which has the creative title Horror Stories. Now, while I did say that this is a horror feature film, in truth it's actually more of an anthology movie. Examples of this are things like the ABCs of Death or the VHS movies. Basically a load of short films tied together by some kind of theme or narrative. And my god, it's genuinely concerning how far those films fell off. But unlike VHS or the ABCs of Death, where all the shorts are made by different directors, all the shorts in this film are made by one person. Which, on the surface, is very impressive. Until you actually watch the movie. Which, if I was feeling generous, would describe as a chore. And that's because the story here felt very much like an afterthought. Things like basic VFX or convoluted twists or long takes using an unbalanced stabiliser take priority in this movie as if it's something the audience should care about more than actually being entertained. And as fun and creative as it may be for you to try out these techniques, like with everything else, there's a time and a place. So with that being said, let's get into it. Horror Story starts with a group of people attending a supernatural reading. And not like a psychic reading, they're literally reading from a book. The Book of Realms, to be precise. Which actually looks pretty authentic, so points there on attention to detail. But this book isn't made to be read. In fact, you experience it. Simply touching this book can transport you to another dimension, apart from here where it just doesn't for some reason. And also I just want to say I like this guy who plays the part of creepy host perfectly.
That's the thrill, isn't it? The unknown, the unexpected.
He's got the accent and the look and seems to be one of the few characters in this movie that actually brings an energy to a role. Everyone else gives, at best, subpar performances and at worst uncomfortable performances.
Yeah, come on then, slap me.
What?
You heard, slap me. I've been a bad boy. I need to be punished.
And unfortunately there is a lot of bad acting and clunky dialogue throughout this movie.
What?
Wait. Look.
So what, let's just go past her.
And really this film, on a technical level, is not good. And I'm going deeper than just the shots don't look cinematic. Which I guess you could argue could be a conscious choice from the director. Spoiler, it's not. There's constant gaps in sound, most of the night scenes are completely underlit. Colour matching shots is not even considered in this movie. And understanding what's going on visually is a major issue. And we can confirm this with our intro scene. So I understand we're at this supernatural book club thing, but so far I've counted 8 characters, which is fine, but there's no establishing shot of the group together, and I find myself getting taken aback every time someone's head pops on screen from out of nowhere. It's the simple things like where we are and who is in the scene that this film seems to really struggle with. But anyway, this lady volunteers to put a hand on the book before being transported to another plane of existence.
Whoa. Where am I?
Just enter the story.
What?
Just enter any room.
And look, I actually really like this idea. Rather than the book taking them directly into the story, this little extension to the scene was a really nice touch. But that's about it for the positives. So our first shot opens with 2 people kissing in the park. And they're really going for it. I was actually confused, thinking maybe this was the first time we'll see doggers in a horror movie. I mean, let's ignore things like the random black frame and dirt on the camera sensor. We're going to see a lot of technical errors in this film. But soon enough, we meet the antagonist of our story.
What the fuck?
And this would have been a really cool shot to introduce the villain, but instead the director chose to have him goofily emerge from the bushes. I'm not sure how this benefits the story, but okay. And look, while clowns may have an eerie aesthetic, mainly because of serial killers and other successful horror movies, this doesn't mean that clowns are inherently scary, and this is proven by the fact that this clown isn't. And the word I would use to describe him is annoying.
Balloon!
And this isn't just me saying this. The characters aren't scared, they're irritated.
Cool, man. No balloon! Cool, man.
Also, I know this is pretty obvious, but this isn't magic.
Eight pieces of paper! Yeah, mate, listen. Great and all, but can you get lost?
Hey,
Kind of.
don't be mean. Or he'll kill you.
Yeah, right. What the fuck? Yo, chill. What are you doing with that? What are you doing?
Now that he's dead, the clown sets his eyes on the girl and we get a very annoying chase scene. Of course. Why is it that when women fall over in films, they can never get back up?
They fall like toddlers, you know? It's like they never fell in their life. They never put their hands out. It's horrific to watch.
So the clown ties the girl up against a tree, very loosely, and we get to see some more tedious magic. And then...
Fuck you!
So I'm actually trying to understand what's going on here. He's forcing an apple into her mouth and it's crushing her teeth? Or is he squeezing her jaw? Either way, that somehow knocks her out. I don't think that's how that works. Moments later, she wakes up again and we get more of the same bad magic. And then the girl is just left to escape. Well, what was the point in any of that? Oh, so that's the big payoff. We just sat through this whole game of cat and mouse so he could hit her in the face with a stick. And this isn't even a good cat and mouse scenario. There was no tension, there was no point where the girl may have gotten away, or where the clown struggled to catch her. It just did the bare minimum. And the thing that really gets me annoyed about this short is that it relies on the audience being inherently terrified of clowns, rather than the clown doing anything remotely terrifying. Like if we look at something like Stephen King's It, the premise wasn't clowns equals horror. It was that this clown eats children. This clown your parents can't see. And this clown you can't stop.
Here I am, Wheezy.
Pennywise didn't just throw knives or hit people with sticks. In fact, even its appearance as a clown had a meaning behind it. To entice his victims. Kids. And sure, It the clown could be obnoxious and silly.
Beep, beep, Richie.
But these traits never undermined his capacity for terror, especially to one of the other characters. There was no point where one of the kids would flippantly tell him,
Yeah, mate, listen. Great and all, but can you get lost?
okay, so I know we're barely into this movie, but I just have to say that I think conceptually, it's almost impossible for this film to work. And let me tell you why.
In June 2023, I set myself a challenge, or a goal, to create 10 short films by the end of 2023, within 6 months. I took on the roles of writing, producing, directing, editing.
So there's nothing wrong with having goals, and you should feel very proud that you managed to achieve what you set out to do. But there's clearly a quantity over quality approach here.
After completing my 5th short film, It dawned on me that these shorts could be compiled into a feature-length movie.
No, why would you do that? Let's not even touch on the fact that the difference between your first short film and your 10th short film should be severely obvious. But is it really the best idea to string all of these films together after the fact? Should that not have been the intent from the start? But anyway, back to the movie. Now this short was hard to make sense of, and that's not because of the story, but because this filmmaker seems to be allergic to lighting. Some parts of the film were so dark that I genuinely didn't know what was going on. But credit where credit's due, and the story here is actually pretty intriguing. A middle-aged man who still lives with his mum spots a dead woman's body in the forest and falls in love. And this short had some pretty good makeup effects, and the dead girl, when we can actually see her, is pretty convincing. And even though the acting isn't great...
Please, Mum, don't be jealous. You know you're the most important woman in my life.
This does a really good job at setting tone, and shows how one relationship, however highly questionable, can blossom at the expense of another. I mean, it's not exactly Citizen Kane, but after the last short, this is definitely the better story. One thing that I did find strange is that there's this giant picture of what looks like a lion or a tiger that just feels really out of place. Like, what is this meant to represent? It's so big and distracting that surely it must mean something. And it's not even hung up, it's just balanced on a radiator. That's a fire hazard.
Would you like to join us for dinner?
Oh, I'd love to.
Fantastic.
Now, while it's clear that the dead girl isn't actually talking back, this sets up how our character thinks. He's inventing conversations with other people. And I thought I'd explain this because it's actually foreshadowing events that happen later in the movie. And my god, it is such a relief to actually have to think after 12.5 minutes. And because this short seems like it was given more care and attention than the others, I actually don't want to spoil the plot. So if this film review has somehow intrigued you, then there's a link to the full film in the description below. But if I had one bit of advice for this director, it would simply be to use some lights. There was just a lot of stuff that we couldn't see, and my eyes were getting sore from all the squinting. But in this short, you showed that you can actually craft a narrative that isn't just piggybacking off other successful properties. This had a few layers to it, and the setups were really nice. The musical cues were at times a little overbearing. But aside from that, one thing I appreciate is that I could tell what you were going for. And at this point, that means a lot. So, good job. Okay, so this is probably the most offensive shot in this movie, so get ready. We start with a couple walking through the forest, and one of them is documenting the journey on a flip cam. Spoilers, this bears no importance on the plot and is soon forgotten about after the first minute. I guess it's just there because another horror movie did it. And as they go deeper into the forest... Cut! Which crew member left their closing shot?
Hold on.
What's wrong?
I need to pee.
Seriously? Now? Can you not hold it?
I'll be quick.
So while he's off squirting somewhere in the forest...
David! David is not funny!
And without even washing his hands, David reveals a little too much about himself.
You know how I feel about dark, empty, quiet woods with no one around.
Stop it.
Alright! I'm right here! Hey! Hey!
David, look.
What the fuck? How long were we kissing for?
Really? Really, it's been like 3 seconds. Anyway, I just wanted to prepare you for this next part because we're about to meet the dancing lady.
What?
Wait. Look.
Okay, so this has confused me a little. It's not so much scary, it's more... And are they the clothes from earlier? I'm sorry, I just wasn't expecting a dancing lady to be wearing a bubble jacket. I guess that's new.
Look.
So what? Let's just go past her.
What? I mean, there's unrealistic and then there's this. If I'm in the woods at night and I see a man in a wheelchair, I'm still running away. So this guy decides that he can reason with the dancing lady.
Hi, excuse me. This is really silly, but you're freaking out my girlfriend. I just wanted to, Hey, excuse me, I'm talking to you.
Why are you throwing stuff at her? What's the point in that? And what are you throwing at her? A rock? I'm beginning to think this David character is a bit psychotic. And while the majority of this terrible scene is down to the writer, I can't let the actors get away with this either.
What the hell are you doing?
I didn't throw it at her fruit next to her to get her attention. What the fuck? Hey, excuse me.
Excuse me, you're in my personal space. And look, it's not necessarily a bad thing that David isn't scared. In fact, it can make for a much more grounded experience if one of the characters is sceptical towards the supernatural. And he's clearly trying to be the protector here. But did you really have to make it so that David is annoyed by the dancing lady? We're supposed to be in a horror movie.
What the fuck? Hey, excuse me.
She's got a fucking knife, David. Come back. If we can find some other way.
It's okay. Hey, it's okay.
What do you mean it's okay? She's got a knife. I mean, it would have been nice if we didn't have to get told she had one. I would have liked to work that out on my own.
What the fuck?
So this might feel like deja vu, but now the dancing lady sets her sights on David's girlfriend and chases her through the forest before she falls over and kills her. The end. You know what the annoying thing is? I actually had a good feeling about this film. It was the most consistent when it came to colour. Well, at least the shots matched. And even your flip cam footage looked authentic. And the reason I bring this up is because so many films, even Hollywood films, missed the mark on this. I remember 4K widescreen back in 1988, but this short is an example of a filmmaker thinking that horror is just an inclusion of elements that have been successful in other films, like a mysterious entity in the forest that can control time or make characters hallucinate. So with all that being said, let's get back to the movie. And I hope that we get back on form for this next one. So, I'm gonna be honest. I didn't have high expectations for this short. And my main problem with this director is that the ideas I've seen so far haven't felt original. In fact, some have seemed completely plagiarised. But I'm trying to stay positive. At least this time we're actually using the name of the property that we're lifting from. And I can't help but think maybe this is because Dracula just so happens to be in the public domain. This is also the shortest short in this film and comes in at just over 3 minutes. And I have to say that even at this length, it still feels overly drawn out. But we'll get to that. We open this film with some pretty impressive drone shots, but I don't want to give too much credit here, as I think every other YouTuber also has access to these shots. So let's just focus on the terribly delivered monologue.
If you look closely, you may find that the hunter can be hunted. I'm one of many who calls these streets my home. I blend into the crowds, just another face people's eyes glance with over without.
Wait, what was that?
People's eyes glance with over without, with over without.
Oh wow. Not only does it feel like the person reading this is completely disinterested, but I get the impression that you didn't care enough to just say, "Hey, can you read that again please? That was really awful." So this film is about a woman that has a try before you buy approach to prostitution.
You gotta pay.
And not only are her entrepreneurial skills unconventional, she's also a vampire hunter. That is one hell of a side hustle. I'm also not quite sure she's cut out for vampire hunting if she's knocked out this easily by just your average John.
Come on, you've got to pay. Oh, come.
Get off the side!
And when I said before that this feels stretched out, the majority of this film is just this prostitute slash vampire hunter and Dracula simply walking the streets of London. And I know the point of this is to build tension, but at some points this feels absurd. Like, is he really walking down the street like this?
You're right, my dear.
I'm not in the mood.
Well, you shouldn't walk here alone. Let me accompany you.
I said I'm not in the mood.
Okay, so I have a few problems with this part, so bear with me. Once again, the protagonist in this story is not scared of what we, the audience, should be scared of. I don't know why this is a common theme in all of your films, but please stop. And secondly, if this girl actually is a vampire hunter,
Get off the side!
then why isn't she, I don't know, doing something now that the vampire is actually there? And why is Dracula portrayed as this ineffective sex pest?
I'm not in the mood.
Well, you shouldn't walk here alone. Let me accompany you.
He's supposed to be the Lord of Darkness, and this girl speaks to him like a hobo asking for change. And then there's this line that feels so contrived.
Look after myself, thank you very much.
Oh, I can see that. But there are far worse things than muggers lurking in the darkness.
His tone here implies that he's responding to something she said about muggers, when she didn't. It's just a very odd conversation. This is probably the sloppiest writing I've seen so far in this film, and I'm going to go out on a limb and say this is the short you spent the least amount of time on. But as a positive, I will say, I like the makeup in this scene. I think we're more in the realms of He Who Shall Not Be Named than Dracula, but there's definitely some effort that's gone into that face.
I led him through the shadows, a deliberate dance of predator and prey. The narrow alley was just a taste.
That doesn't explain anything. You had your chance to kill him right there. Where are you going? So, more walking. And what do you know?
Remember me, Dracula?
Didn't we meet like 30 seconds ago?
I've been waiting a very long time for this moment.
Again, why didn't you do this earlier? Is it because the film would only then be 2 minutes long? We get some boring monologue about how Dracula killed this woman's family, blah blah blah. Even Dracula doesn't give a shit. Am I the only person that cares about this movie?
You took everything from me. And now I'm going to take your undead life. This is the end, Dracula. I'll see you in hell.
This director. I'm not even going to comment on the special effects, which were good for what they were, but you know that there's other ways that you can kill people, right? This is the 5th time someone has been stabbed to death, and we're on your 4th short film. Think about what that says about you. And look, why did this have to be Dracula? Why did you have to take an established character who is known for being strong, seductive, and ruthless, and unironically and unintentionally turn him into someone weak and repulsive? This story would have worked better and been less insulting if you'd actually replaced Dracula with the mugger.
But there are far worse things than muggers lurking in the darkness.
So there's not much more to say about this one. Personally, I think I gave it more consideration than anyone else has. So moving swiftly on.
Get off the side!
So this is a home invasion short where, scratch that, I don't know if I would consider this a home invasion movie, when the lead character pretty much lets these people into her home. And what makes this even more worrying is that she answers the door with a baby in her arms. Mother of the year over here.
And don't forget all the trouble we got into.
Why does somebody not know how to flush a toilet after they've had a shit?
That's what I mean.
Well, it was fucking one of yous. Disgusting!
But in all seriousness, this is a good choice. We've raised the stakes from a woman being alone in her apartment to a woman having to protect her baby from intruders. And the actions of the latter character could be far more unpredictable and interesting. Are we actually onto something with this story? So the two men look for valuables and are disappointed to discover that there's nothing really worth taking. And I don't think this woman's itching to help them out either, so as an extra incentive, one of the men decides to take her baby hostage.
No, I need to feed him! You don't understand, I need to feed him!
It's a fucking doll!
I need to feed him!
Just a doll, lady. Come on, mate. Let's get out of it. This is getting a bit weird now, okay?
You will both die today.
Okay. I wanted to show that pretty long segment of the film because I think it deserved it. I mean, we're not quite at Oscar levels, but this really worked. The intense sound design, the wailing screams, I actually felt a twinge of panic. I mean, I think this part is stupid. I don't know why you would lift your mask up as a burglar. I mean, it's not like he'd want to be recognised as...
Hold on.
What's wrong?
I need to pee.
Oh my god, it's him. Why's he back? Please, no more of him.
Mate, come on, let's get out of it.
Where did she go?
Thank God. Oh, and he's in it too.
Yeah, mate, listen. Great and all, but can you get lost?
I thought he was dead. I'm glad he's back. I liked him. We get some scenes that show how the characters' roles are now reversed. The predator has literally become the prey. The atmosphere here is cold and dark, and this is handled pretty well, all things considered.
Where the fuck do you think you're going, you fuck? I'm not done with you yet.
Now, I don't know about you, but I thought this part was pretty funny. Upper class people swearing is just a joy to hear for some reason. I also think that the makeup here is at its best. I was actually thinking of blurring it because it was so gruesome. And then I remembered I'm not monetized on YouTube, so who cares? But aside from the makeup, I think this is your strongest shot. Compared to the others, this has the most unique story. And you conveyed this in a pretty skillful way, which is something I won't be saying a lot. I would have probably moved the Wi-Fi router out of shot for the main death scene, but hey, that's just me. So that's the end of Devil's Feast. But before we move on to the next one, I just wanted to pick up on a few technical things. I did feel that this film constantly took you out of the story by showing things like iPhones illuminating backgrounds or lights turning off mid-shot for no reason. And this sign that says Century, what does this mean? And what does it add to the scene? And who has a framed map of London on their wall? And I know this may sound like I'm being picky, but the whole point of a good horror is that you're immersed in it. And I found myself constantly having to ignore these little distractions when they shouldn't have been there in the first place. But I'm going to be fair here, and despite the negatives, I think this short is where you really impressed me. And I would say that this falls more along the lines of quality than quantity compared to your earlier work. So, good job.
We have 2 stories left.
I guess it's my turn now.
So you might think that I've forgotten about the whole book club thing that we saw at the start of the movie. But honestly, there's not really been that much to say about it. It's been a fairly uneventful and repetitive scene that we keep coming back to after each shot. Character puts hand on book, new short film begins, rinse and repeat. There have been a few points where some characters got a little freaked out.
I have enough of this.
You cannot leave!
But I really didn't think that was worth mentioning. Until now, I guess. Okay, we have a lot to unpack with this one. And I think I'm going to be a bit more sympathetic here because it seems like the director was attempting something a bit more high concept. And maybe the result wasn't as epic as you originally planned it to be. But I can tell that this film, you really challenged not only the audience, but yourself. Now we open with a woman getting out of a taxi, and I can already tell that this is not stock drone footage as it includes the lead character. Now I'm not a big fan of these digital zooms that are constantly happening, but you're trying something different, and I'm all for that.
Hello, you must be Veronica. Hi, yeah, nice to meet you.
So a young aspiring actress called Veronica shows up at a woman's house, who I guess she's renting a bedroom from, and the two have an uncomfortable conversation.
Oh wow, you're an actress. What are you rehearsing?
It's just a small act. A dark story about revenge.
Oh, it's nice to have dreams. I always wanted to be a dancer.
Oh really?
But then life happened. Anyway.
Ow! Don't do that. I swear the musical cues in this short are just ear-busting. I don't know if they're supposed to act as jump scares, but don't listen to this movie with headphones on. So Veronica makes herself feel comfortable. And later that night goes out to the garden for some air.
Can't you please?
The older woman offers Veronica a mysterious cigarette. Is it just me, or is this a not so subtle plot device that will become relevant later in the movie? But hold up, we're about to get a little crazy now, and I won't blame you if you don't understand what's going on, but I'm going to do my best to summarise. So the older woman wakes up in the middle of the night and heads downstairs to find a pentagram symbol on her kitchen floor. And this is the start of what is one of the most contrived twists I've ever seen, and bear in mind we're barely 3 minutes into this movie. So the old woman is greeted by Veronica, who refers to her as Mother.
Hello, Mother.
We then meet a completely incidental character called Eric who, as you'll soon see, has one job in this movie. Veronica then reveals that she is the baby the woman abandoned 27 years ago.
Is that Mother? The little baby you rejected 27 years ago.
But not only did the woman abandon her, she burned her alive. Was that really necessary? And how did you escape that?
My new family saved me. They protected me.
That doesn't really answer that question, but okay. The older woman, who is probably just as confused as we are, attempts to run away, but hey, these guys have supernatural powers and drag her back using the Force. So finally, after the 27-year-long wait, Veronica stabs the old lady through the heart. And I know it's another stabbing, but at least this one means something. So that's the end of the movie. But what happened to Eric? And so it turns out Veronica didn't stab the old woman, and in fact stabbed Eric instead. Lucky he was here, or this story wouldn't make any sense. It turns out the old woman had planted something in the mysterious cigarette, and this made Veronica hallucinate. It's also really convenient how that only affected her now, and not while she was setting up the pentagram or lighting the candles while the old woman was asleep. And we're still not done.
You're just a foul child of the devil.
Okay, so I have watched some fast-paced movies, but none quite like this. This was a lot. So I want to make it clear that I actually appreciate what the filmmaker was trying to do. It just didn't really work. It was a very ambitious story for the length of time that it was, and the more twists that were thrown in, the more questions I was asking myself. Like, what was this whole thing with devil worshipping? How does that fit into the story? Why, if this woman wanted to kill her, did she wait until now? How did she know the mysterious cigarette would make her stab Eric? And look, I do have to admit that the ridiculousness of this short actually made me laugh in parts. But I'm sure that wasn't the intention of the filmmaker. But I would still give that points at least for being entertaining. And if we had more time spent on these characters developing their backstories, I think this would have worked a lot better. Again, the difference in quality between these shorts is making the whole viewing experience difficult. Knowing that all these shorts were made by one person, and not being a super fan of your work, doesn't really motivate me to keep watching. But I will. So this film puts us firmly back in the realms of predictability with a good dose of nonsense. God, it's good to be back. And while there's nothing that's outrageously bad about this particular short, it's definitely the least remarkable. So let's just get through it. In this story, a man goes on a blind date with Lola, who is a doll, I guess. And there's no doubt she is a bit strange.
That's nice. I'm glad we finally met. I've heard loads of great things about you.
The two don't exactly hit it off. Lola won't stop talking about tea for some reason.
I like tea parties. Would you like a tea?
No, I don't really drink tea.
My favourite thing is tea parties with biscuits. Did you want to order some now? Tea with biscuits?
And I know this is meant to be creepy. And I mean this genuinely. Why? Yes, dolls are associated with tea and biscuits and tea parties. Pretty much everything tea. But why are we being hit over the head with this? It's not creepy. And to the audience, it's just another way of saying, I am a doll. Which Lola outright says here.
I am a doll.
But anyway, using his best judgment, the man decides to leave Lola to pick up the bill and heads home. And I want you to know that at this point, we're about a quarter of the way through this short, because we're going to go through the rest of it pretty quickly. It turns out Lola has followed the man home, and while he remains unaware, she sneaks around his apartment. Later that night, when the man gets into the shower, she takes this opportunity to poison his drink, which somehow turns him into a doll. The end. It's just meh. There's no threat. The protagonist isn't scared. Lola doesn't have any superpowers other than talking about tea.
Would you like a tea?
And frankly, I'm more scared for her if the man finds out she's there. She's not something untouchable like a ghost or a demon. She's a girl that thinks she's a doll that showed up for a Tinder date. And jumping off from that, I don't see her as this creepy, evil doll. I see her as a lonely woman who thinks cosplay is appropriate for first dates. It's sad. And also, how dumb are you to drink your glass of water when it's this colour? So that was Lola the Doll, a completely forgettable short that didn't do anything unexpected or interesting. How disappointing. Nearly there. Nearly there. There are 2 more shorts left, and I have finished this review. I really didn't think it would take this long, but I had so much to say. I've just not seen horror abused in this way before. That's really what the frightening thing about this film is. She Lives in Me starts with a very long and drawn out 3-minute intro that is both boring and silent. I literally thought YouTube had stopped playing sound for some reason. Listen to this. Anyway, after all the nothingness, we get a template jump scare. But hey, it was all a dream. And now we're in a therapy office as this character talks about the woman he keeps seeing at night. I'm assuming this is her. But what this conversation with the therapist does is gives us a character backstory. And this is very different from your other films where exposition is relayed to us as if we couldn't follow our own shadow. This short misdirects us and actually has a meaning behind it, more so than just clown equals scary or doll equals creepy. This is about a man struggling with his own identity and how he plans to solve it.
Did Iris do that to you?
I don't know. They were there when I woke up.
It seems Iris represents a lingering unease around your transition.
I know, I really wasn't expecting this either. Is this one of the first horror stories about gender transitioning? I honestly have no idea. And you would think, judging by the reviews so far, that tackling such a culturally sensitive topic would make it easier to point out the flaws at the expense of the director. Like, is this a film created off the back of a cultural trend? Is this made with a woke bias? Well, the answer is no. And I actually think you handled this very appropriately. And what's more, it feels like a story that you actually cared about. It doesn't feel like a film directly influenced by a Hollywood blockbuster. And for the first time, I think I've heard the director's voice. So for that reason, I want to leave this film for anyone who might be interested. And also to offer some advice. I think it would really benefit this short to be put on YouTube as a standalone piece, rather than in and amongst these other horror shorts. They're really not doing it any favours. And with all that being said, good job. And I am happy. We're on to the last film. So you'd think that with your last short, you'd want to go out with a bang. Something memorable as this is going to be the last thing people see when they finish a film. That's what I'd think. Divine Retribution is one of the most pointless shorts in this movie. Don't get me wrong, I'd rather watch this than Lola the Doll, but it's a tough call. So a man shows up to an appointment with a hooker who has a nice shaped cross above a bed, and I mention this because the filmmaker keeps cutting to it. Look, we get it. This is going to come into play later. We understand. Now leave us alone. And the man admits that his wife doesn't quite know how to please him in the bedroom.
Wouldn't want my wife to suspect anything.
Shouldn't you be loyal to her?
After 30 years, it all gets boring. And she was never any good at it anyway.
You took vows.
She's taken a pretty high moral stance on this, considering her line of work. I mean, she must know that he's not the only married man paying for sex. But I don't know why I'm giving this any thought, because she has no conviction in her own beliefs and has sex with him anyway.
Yeah, come on then. Slap me.
What?
You heard? Slap me. I've been a bad, bad boy. I need to be punished. Slap me harder, you bitch.
This is the only part of this movie that puts it above Lola the Doll in the rankings. Quite sad, really.
What the fuck is
Repentance alone is not enough.
Rotten whore.
Atonement requires sacrifice.
And that's it. Another stabbing to death in your supernatural horror film. And would you believe we've reached the end? Okay. So look, I'm aware that I've been giving this movie a hard time. And I wanted to speak to you directly, the director. And I want to let you know that this isn't a personal attack, obviously. And I don't want to hurt your feelings. But you attempted horror, which is my favourite genre of film. And I think I'm pretty well versed in that. So I think I can tell you what went wrong. And I could talk all day about the dodgy camera work and the sound effects that could kill people. I'm looking at the bigger picture. If we look at VHS or ABCs of Death, these films had concepts. In the original VHS, it was based around found footage and how different directors would tackle that specific niche. And the ABCs of Death gave each director a letter. They'd then come up with a word starting with that letter, and then make a film based around that word. Sure, it was a little convoluted, but you can get the appeal. And what that does is it sets an expectation. The audience can expect that they'll be seeing a different level of skill and quality from each director's film. And if they don't like one shot, they simply have to wait a few minutes and can see a completely different style of film. And in a way, these anthology films help give shorts a wider appeal. However, in your film, we're very much looking at your amateur filmmaking career. And because you're starting at an amateur level in writing, editing, and camera, this can make for a tough watch. And look, maybe I'm reading too much into this. Maybe this is a film just for yourself and your personal improvement. And there's nothing wrong with that. It just seems like a lot of effort. 10 films in 6 months, as well as the short film wrapping it all together, and then sending it to a stranger on the internet to review. But look, I will say this. There were points in this movie where I saw Lucas Disparro, the director. The problem was that these moments were sandwiched between clunky dialogue, pointless information, and lazy characters. But as one final piece of advice, if you could create 10 films in 6 months, imagine what you could do with one film in 6 months, or one film in a year, and really embrace that ethos of quality over quantity. And look, obviously I'm not a fan. At the end of the day, I'm just some guy on the internet. And regardless of what I say in this review, I don't want you to stop making films. And if you make horror stories too, I'll probably watch it. But in the meantime, stay creative and stay safe.